Okay, so an unexpected meeting last week in Scotland between former President Donald Trump and the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. It really opened a fascinating window, I think, into some of the most complex global challenges we're all, grappling with right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the setting itself was kind of interesting.
Right. Not some stuffy government office, but, a luxurious golf course. And their talks, they apparently moved pretty fast from boasts about property to these really urgent international concerns.
You can just imagine the pressure, can't you? They're facing questions about the deepening food crisis in Gaza. I mean, those harrowing images of starving children, and then the desperate calls for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas.
And on top of that, they also explored ways to, try and force an end to Russia's war in Ukraine, debating new approaches to get people to the negotiating table.
And it wasn't just conflict. They navigated tricky conversations about future trade deals, global tariffs, revealing really different approaches to these big geopolitical issues.
Yeah, it's like this high-stakes meeting really highlighted the divergent paths world powers might take on humanitarian crises and, international stability. So coming up, we're going to take a deep dive into the surprising facts and crucial insights from this unique encounter, exploring what these powerful conversations might mean for the future. Okay, let's unpack this then. Today, we're taking that deep dive into the meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer in Scotland. We're pulling from a range of sources here, everything from news reports right through to academic analyses on U.S. foreign policy.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how just one meeting, even a sort of informal one like this, can shed light on so many interconnected global issues.
Right.
So our mission today is really to extract the most important nuggets from these sources, help you quickly grasp the key dynamics, understand a bit of the history, and look at the potential future implications.
Hopefully you'll get a shortcut to being well-informed, maybe some surprising facts, and enough context to make those aha moments, really hit home. So let's set the scene for this unusual summit. As we said, not a grand government building, but Trump's luxury golf course in Scotland, the Trump International Golf Links near Aberdeen.
Right. And reports suggest Trump was really, showcasing its opulence. There was even a ribbon cutting for a third course, apparently.
And Prime Minister Starmer, who isn't actually a golfer, he reportedly played along with Trump's enthusiasm for his properties.
Well, it is a unique backdrop, and it's one Trump has used strategically before, hasn't he? I think back in 2019, he posted about his Turnberry course furthering UK relationship or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it really underscores how, for Trump, his business interests and his personal brand often seem to intertwine with high-level diplomacy.
So beyond the golf course talk, what were the really pressing topics on the table? The sources are pretty consistent here. The deepening food crisis in Gaza, Russia's war in Ukraine, and discussions around tariff rates.
Yeah, pretty heavy stuff. And what's particularly striking, I think, from the reports is Trump's initial take on the Gaza situation.
How so?
Well, he apparently started by complaining that the U.S. hadn't received enough credit for its past food aid. But then, when reporters confronted him with images of emaciated children from Gaza, his tone reportedly shifted quite dramatically.
Really?
Yeah, he was quoted saying something like, I don't know. I mean, based on television, I would say not particularly because those children look very hungry, which is, a real contrast to Starmer's immediate reaction.
What did Starmer say?
He just very forcefully, I think people in Britain are revolted at seeing what they are seeing on their screens. Just straight to the point.
Wow. So it's almost like the visual evidence, the sort of raw humanity of it, cut through his usual political talk?
It seems that way based on the reporting.
Yeah,
that shift in tone on Gaza is definitely notable.
And our sources describe the meeting dynamics as playing out like Trump's meetings with foreign leaders in the Oval Office, where Trump kind of fielded most of the questions, even though they were technically on Starmer's home turf.
That's right. And the discussions weren't just, strictly official policy either. There are these side conversations. Trump apparently batting away questions about the Jeffrey Epstein case.
Oh, boy.
Reiterating his push for the Fed to lower interest rates and repeating his longstanding grudge against wind farms near his property.
Right, the wind farms. Always the wind farms. It really highlights how different leaders process these huge humanitarian crises, doesn't it?
It really does.
And there was a lighter moment reported, too, when Trump criticized London Mayor Sadiq Khan, called him terrible and a nasty person.
Yeah, but Starmer's response was pretty classic, apparently. He's a friend of mine, actually.
Huh. Good for him.
It's a small detail, maybe, but it speaks to those unexpected personal dynamics you get even in these high-stakes meetings. And despite those jabs, Starmer apparently offered significant praise for Trump, saying, because we focus on what's important for our two countries, we get along very well.
Interesting dynamic. And it's worth noting, the public definitely noticed the visit. There were demonstrators protesting Trump's presence in Balmady. One protester quoted accusing him of dismantling Western civilization.
Yeah, and these protests had apparently been ongoing across Scotland even before this specific meeting happened. It wasn't just about this one visit.
Okay, so let's zoom in on Gaza then.
Yeah.
The humanitarian situation, according to the sources we've seen, is described as undeniably desperate.
Yeah, desperate seems like the right word. We're seeing more and more reports of starvation, widespread hunger. Nearly 40% of people reportedly going days without eating. And tragically, hundreds are said to have died from starvation and malnutrition. It's just awful.
And aid efforts are happening, right? Britain and Jordan doing airdrops, Israel temporarily easing restrictions for some UN convoys.
We are, but it's not straightforward. There's a really crucial counterpoint here from the head of UNRWA, that's the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees.
Okay, what does he say?
Philippe Lazzarini. He actually called the airdrops a distraction, said they're inefficient, expensive, potentially even harmful. His point was, a man-made hunger can only be addressed by political will. Lift the siege, open the gates, and guarantee safe movements and dignified access to people in need.
That's a strong statement.
It is, but then you have the Israel Defense Forces countering that, claiming there was no starvation in Gaza. So you have these completely conflicting statements, which just highlights how complex it is to assess and, well, address the crisis on the ground.
So, given that grim reality and the complexities, what were the policy positions on Gaza that came up in the meeting?
Well, as we mentioned, Trump's shift in tone seemed to continue. He reportedly suggested Israel has a lot of responsibility for what's happening and said he'd tell Netanyahu, I want them to make sure they get the food.
And Starmer's position?
Starmer's position was also clear. Britain, along with France and Germany, had already criticized Israel for withholding essential humanitarian assistance. And we also know, that Starmer's under pressure from his own Labour Party to follow France's lead in recognizing a Palestinian state.
Right. How's he handling that?
Well, he supports statehood for Palestinians, but he's maintained it must be part of a wider plan for a two-state solution. It can't just happen in isolation.
And what was Trump's take on Starmer's position?
According to the reports, Trump just noted, I don't mind him taking a position on the matter, sort of a non-committal acknowledgement.
Okay. Moving beyond the Gaza crisis, they also touched on broader geopolitical issues, specifically peace efforts in Ukraine. That conflict is still just dominating everything.
Absolutely. Reports indicate Trump mentioned again his previous intention to force Putin to the negotiating table.
Yeah.
He talked about a 50-day window before.
I remember that.
Yeah, but now he apparently suggested an even shorter time frame, like 10 or 12 days for a halt, saying there's no reason in waiting. It shows this consistent, maybe evolving desire on his part to quickly mediate some kind of resolution.
And the global economy came up too. Trade agreements, tariffs.
That's right. The focus was apparently on refining that bilateral trade agreement announced last month between the U.S. and U.K.
Are there sticking points?
Seems like it. Steel imports were mentioned specifically. And we also learned that Trump recently set up a trade framework with European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen. That includes 15% tariffs on most goods from both sides, though a lot of the details are apparently still pending. It points to a broader strategy around tariffs, maybe.
And didn't Scotland's leader chime in about whiskey?
Yes. A local concern made its way into the talks. The leader of Scotland urged Trump to lift the 10% tariff on Scotch whiskey, citing its uniqueness and its economic importance to Scotland.
What was Trump's response?
Pretty non-committal, apparently. With the smile, he said something like, I'm not a big whiskey drinker, but maybe I should be when I'm over here. A bit of a lighthearted deflection amid serious economic talks.
Okay, so it's clear that while specific issues like Gaza, Ukraine, trade were key, this meeting also kind of served as a window into these wider, often conflicting philosophies on how major powers approach the world.
Definitely.
So maybe let's zoom out now and place these discussions into the broader historical context of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, and also look at what some significant future blueprints are proposing.
Good idea.
Before we do that, maybe it's worth quickly outlining those persistent, really contentious issues that just seem to derail peace negotiations in the Israel-Palestine conflict again and again. Borders, settlements, Jerusalem, refugees, security for Israel, recognizing Israel as a Jewish state, internal politics. It's a long list.
It is. And understanding where we might be heading requires looking back a bit. Take the Obama administration, for instance. Their aim was generally seen as change and re-engagement.
Right, pursuing the two-state solution.
Exactly. Based on 1967 borders with land swaps, Obama consistently called for a halt to Israeli settlement expansion. And remember, in his final days, the U.S. abstained on that UN Security Council resolution condemning settlements. That was seen by some as a kind of wake-up call to both sides.
And Obama's approach was often described as more, let's say, pro-Palestinian, aimed at achieving positive peace through cooperation, though critics said it lacked teeth, maybe.
That's a fair summary of how it was often perceived. Then came Trump's first term, which marked a significant departure, very much characterized by that America First stance and strong, often unconditional support for Israel.
And he questioned the need for a two-state solution outright, didn't he? Said he was open to either one state or two-state.
He did. And key actions, of course, included moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing it as Israel's capital, a huge, controversial move overturning decades of U.S. policy.
Yeah, that was massive.
His focus seemed largely on fostering diplomatic interests and building these regional security pacts, like the Abraham Accords, bringing Israel and Arab states together against Iran and what the administration termed Islamic terrorism.
An approach often described as alienating Palestinians and many international actors, and maybe aiming more for negative peace, just the absence of violence, rather than tackling root causes.
That's how many analysts described it, yes. Which brings us to what some are proposing for the future, specifically this conservative framework known as Project 2025.
Right. This is a really comprehensive set of proposals that lays out a very clear, though potentially controversial, vision.
It really is. And according to the sources we've looked at, this blueprint, Project 2025, lays out a conservative vision that would be a significant shift, arguably even from Trump's first term.
How so? What are the core ideas?
Well, drilling down into the source material describing Project 2025, it seems to pivot around maybe 3 core tenets. Again, we're reporting what the sources say about this project, not endorsing it.
Understood. Go ahead.
First, it seems to advocate for almost uncompromising unilateral support for Israel. This includes often rejecting the traditional authority of international legal bodies like the ICC or the ICJ, the very courts looking into allegations of war crimes or genocide, like that South Africa case against Israel.
So less room for international law or criticism.
That seems to be the implication in the descriptions we've read. The framework reportedly suggests little space for criticizing Israeli government policies, sometimes even conflating such criticism with anti-Semitism.
Okay, what's the second tenet?
Second, a potentially dramatic shift in foreign aid and humanitarian assistance. The proposal, as described, involves cutting funds to groups deemed antagonistic to U.S. interests, like the Palestinian Authority. And notably, it suggests prioritizing aid through certain faith-based groups, specifically mentioning increased funding for Christian agencies and making international religious freedom, interpreted mainly as Christianity, central to U.S. aid.
Wow, that's a significant shift in aid policy. And the third?
The third involves a highly restrictive approach to immigration, built around ideological screening. The proposals reportedly advocate expanding measures similar to the previous Muslim ban, using broader ideological screening, and specifically barring refugees from Gaza.
So a very different approach to borders and refugees.
It appears so. The overall framework described in these sources aims to prioritize a strong, unilateral U.S. stance, often driven by quite specific ideological viewpoints. If implemented, it could really reshape America's role in the region and its relationship with international norms and allies.
So the fundamental aha moment here maybe is how this particular blueprint, as described, seeks to inject a very specific ideological framework into foreign policy, potentially isolating the U.S. from global norms and looking quite different from historical approaches.
That seems to be a key takeaway from the analysis of Project 2025, yes.
Okay, so we've journeyed from that Scottish golf course through the complexities of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and then broadened out to look at U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, contrasting past approaches with these potential future blueprints like Project 2025.
Yeah, and if you connect all these dots, connecting it back to the bigger picture, it's pretty clear that these discussions between leaders like Trump and Starmer, they're really just the tip of the iceberg, aren't they?
Seems like it.
They reflect these really deep-seated policy disagreements, long-standing historical tensions, all of which continue to shape the region and, frankly, America's place in the world.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. As these powerful nations try to navigate a world just filled with urgent crises and, well, competing ideologies, what approach do you think will actually bring about stability and maybe lasting peace in the Middle East? Especially when you're confronting these incredibly deep-seated historical grievances and such radically different visions for what the future should even look like. Something to think about.